Today is Asara B'Tevet. I'd like to reflect with you on the meaning of Asara B'Tevet and in some ways how it might relate to us. We said this morning in the Slichos that the Slichos says, Al Shloshtan Kavati Tainis. On three things, Chazal will convey a Tainis. Now we all know the simple shot and why there's a Tainis today was the day that Nebuchadnezzar laid siege to Yerushalayim. It was on the 10th of Teves. But the Slichos mentioned that there were really two other things which were part of the reason for the Gezerah. On the 8th day, as we mentioned it in our Slichos, the Torah was translated into Greek, and there was 3 days of darkness because of that. And on the 9th day, yesterday, was the death, according to most Shitas, the death of Ezra Sofer. So there are three things which we are trying to reflect on our Tainis today. And I'd like to go into, let's talk about the first thing, which is the translation of the Torah into Yavanis. I want to share with you something which is unbelievable. Listen to these words. Maisa behei zekanim. Now it starts out, there were 5 zekanim. Shekosva leTalmai HaMelech. Talmai HaMelech was an Egyptian king who wanted the Torah, the Chumash translated into Greek. Talmai HaMelech es a Torah, Yavanis. Maisa behei zekanim. Shekosva leTalmai HaMelech es a Torah b'Yavanis. They did it for him. V'hai yom kosher liYisrael. That day was kosher liYisrael. Kiyom shenasa ha'egel. It was equivalent to the day of the making of the golden calf. Shelo haisa Torah yechol litargen kol tzarcha. The Torah could not be translated properly, which means that it's eventually going to be, and the Ian Talmud learns that means that koloma shelo yavo atargem berabos hayamin l'dei ziyuv. It's impossible that the Targum is not going to come, the translation of the Torah is not going to come to a ziyuf, means a forgery. Next. Then what we have in our Gemara, Shuv Maisa B'Talmai HaMelech Shekanas Ayin Beis Zekanim. There were 72 Zekanim, Hoshivim B'Shivim L'Shtayim Batim. He put them in 72 rooms. V'lo Gila Lahem Amar Konsam. He didn't tell them why he was gathering together. Niknas the kol echa. He said, "Constantly Torah's Moshe Rabchem. Write down for me the Torah of your Rebbe. Nasan amakom eitzel belev kol echa beechad ve'iskimu daitan ledas echas v'kosel lo Torah b'fnei atzma." They all wrote the same Torah, and it says in here, the Yud Gimel Davar Shinuba. The Gemara tells us they changed 13 things, and the Gemara explains why, because they were afraid that they'd be misinterpreted, and it could lead to minus or heresy of some sort. So they changed the language of the Torah when they put it into Yavanis in a way that anybody should understand, should misunderstand the meaning. We won't go into those changes. But I want you to hear, one, that the translation is compared to Maisa Egel. It's compared to the golden calf. 2, they made 13 changes. Medrash Tanchuma, listen to the Medrash Tanchuma. Unbelievable. The Medrash Tanchuma says as follows. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Bar Shalom, Bikesh Moshe Shetei Mishnah Afi B'Ksav. Moshe Rabbeinu asked that the Mishnah should be written B'Ksav. Sofa Kadosh Baruch Hu, listen to these words. Sofa Kadosh Baruch Hu, She'umos, that the nations are seating the Targum as a Torah. They were going to, in the future, the nations would translate the Torah Los Koronos So Yavanis. The Haim Omrim, and they're going to say, Anu Haim Shel Yisrael. It's ours. It's our Torah. They're going to be Messiah the Torah. They're going to change it and say it's ours. That's a Medrash Tanchuma. So that the Chazal telling us over it was like Maisa Ego, because we're afraid that if the Goyim are going to get the Torah, if the Ummah Solomon are going to have the Torah, they're going to be Messiah of it and say it's theirs. And they're going to, one, they're going to claim to be Klal Yisrael, and 2, they're going to change what the Torah means. Unbelievable. Like a Maisa Egel. If a translation leads to an understanding that the Torah is not ours, but Chas v'Shalom belongs to somebody else, that's like the Egel Azav. Eilo Elokecha Yisrael. These are your gods. This Egel took you out of Mitzrayim, says the pasuk. The Egel took us out of Mitzrayim. It's Avodah Zarah. To think that there's another Am Yisrael. To think, God forbid, there's another Am Yisrael. To think that the words of the Torah can be read and written a different way, that's Avodah Zarah. It's like an Egel Azav. Now I have a kasha for you. The kasha is as follows. We know, it says explicitly in the Torah, that Moshe Rabbeinu was told Klal Yisrael, when they go into Eretz Yisrael, they should write the Torah on stones, on Ever Yarden, in Shivim Lashon. It's a pasuk. Be'er Heitev. It's Be'er Heitev means fully understandable in 70 languages. 70 languages. And that's what they did. They wrote the Torah on the rocks in 70 languages. Moshe Rabbeinu, this is what the Klal Yisrael did when they went into Eretz Yisrael. Number one. Number two, listen to this. How did they write the Torah? Well, it's a machlokes. If you look at the psukim seem to say that they put on lime. They put on lime on the rocks and they wrote the Torah. It's a machlokes in the Gemara whether they first put the line down on the rocks and then they wrote, which makes sense, right? You want people to read it, right? What good is it? You have your right. Now the other shita holds you write the Torah and cover it with lime. The lime is some sort of a white stuff, right? Well, that makes no sense. You want people to read it. It's a machlokes. So now listen carefully. So one sheet is understandable. You wrote it on the rocks. And we want the Ummah Solom to write 70 languages, including Greek, obviously. 70 languages. The other shita holds that what's supposed to happen is that the Devarecha Heich Lamdu also Zman Torah Amalo Bina Yeser Nasim Behem HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave them an extra understanding. V'shigra notiron, they sent their scribes Shalahem v'kilful as a sid. They scraped off the sid, this line, v'hisiu, and they carried it back. Okay, so the Maharsha explains that they were supposed to scrape off this covering and then copy it into like little booklets of some sort, right? And take it back to their nation. Meaning they're supposed to take the Torah, write it, copy it from the rocks, and bring it back. And then we get a wide distribution. That's what the Maharsha says. Very clever. And this was there. Because of this, the Ummah Solom would declare that they're going to go to Gehenna. They should have learned the Torah and they didn't learn it. And Tosas asks, why do you have to wait for this? Right? Being Toma, typically the B'Shas Matan Torah, they wish to offer the Torah to Ummah Solom. Why would they Gazar din then? Yeshloma the onesh ze gadol. Shalach ha'isa ksuva b'yadam lo ratza l'ilmod. They had the Torah in their hands. They were supposed to read it. And they didn't read it. They didn't learn it. Because it was nektam on the Gazar din the Gehenna. Now, it's a very simple question. We have over here, the Talmud Melech has the Torah going into Yavanis. First of all, there's 13 different changes. We don't find anywhere that says the Moshe Rabbeinu told them to make 13 changes on the Torah that they wrote in the rocks. There's no changes. Does anyone appreciate that? It doesn't say anything about changes. 1. 2. Why are we worried that they'll take the Torah and they'll mizayef the Torah? Why are we worried? They're going to take the Torah and claim it's theirs. Here we have a whole Maisa, it's like Maisa Egel, and Moshe Rabbeinu himself tells us, the Be'er Heitev, write the Torah in Shivim Lashon. We want them to read it. We want them to have it in their language. We wrote the Torah on those Avanim, because going into Eretz Yisrael, Brischa Shekasantu V'Israel, Torah Shema, Tanah Schus in Eretz Yisrael is based on the Torah. We're coming into the Torah. We're coming to Eretz Yisrael. Our Schus in Eretz Yisrael is based on Torah. And we're showing Ummah Solom, this is our Schus, this is what we're about. But it's not just for us. The Torah is universal. Everyone has to understand it. And we want you to understand it also. The Eibishter HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants you to understand it. And either they'll become Ger Toshav, they'll become Shaveh Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, or they'll be Megayah, but they're meant to read the Torah. That Torah came from us. We presented it to them. We want them to read it. Now I want to ask you a question. There's 13 places, except for the place where it says Arnevet was Talmai's wife, but all the other places where you can make mistakes in understanding and perhaps come to the wrong conclusion. So why don't we change it for them? The answer is, we just got the Torah 40 years ago. We're coming into Eretz Israel. Everybody heard about Maimed HaSinai. This is our Torah. We're presenting it to you. Read it. You got kashas, come and learn, and we'll explain it to you. We're supposed to learn. And if they don't learn, it says they're chayiv. They should have learned the Torah then. We're presenting it to them. They know it's ours. Nobody can come along later and say, well, that was really our Torah. What do you mean it was our Torah? It was written, it was given to the Yidden, Maimed HaSinai, and this is the Torah. This is what you copied from the Yidden. This is the Torah. Later on, years later, by Talmai HaMelech, hundreds and hundreds of years later, where people forget what happened. And now they're coming, and they want to take this and put it on their bookshelf. They want to take our Torah and put it on their bookshelf. Oh, it says that, by the way, Talmai HaMelech collected all the different svarim that existed at that time. He was interested in having all the knowledge that existed. He wants to put it on a bookshelf. It's ours. He had to trick them into it. He didn't tell them why he got them together. He didn't tell them. They want to take it and they're going to use it. It's ours. Now it's ours. That's a whole different geschäft. Now it's a whole thing. They're going to take it and it can be misused, and that's what happened. There's a huge difference between if the Torah is given by us and we want the Ummah Sa'olam to understand it, which is an obligation on their part to understand it. We want them to understand it. We want that there should be Sheveh Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. We want them to be Geri Toshav. We want them to understand the purpose of this world. We believe in Tikkun Olam, but on our terms. But if they're going to take our Torah and translate in Yavanis and then co-opt it for themselves, that's like a Maisa Egel and 3 days of darkness. 3 days of darkness. Because they translated our Torah and took it for themselves. And now they can manipulate it and mistranslate it, which is what they did, and claim that it's theirs. That is the translation of Torah, and that's a Maisa Egel. Now, let's understand another point here. These 3 things happen next to each other. In other words, we have the translation of the Torah, we have the death of Ezra, and we have the, the sieging of Yerushalayim. So is there any relationship between these things, or is it just the mikra that they all fall out together? Because it's all one fast day. And part of the reason for the fast day, and the reason we're fasting is we're supposed to reflect on these issues and realize that whatever caused these sorrows to happen to us in the past, that we should we realize that they were caused by errors that were done previously, and that we share in the burden of fixing and correcting the behavior that led to those things to happen. So what is there any relationship? So I want to tell you an interesting thing. The Gemara says like this. The Gemara says, it brings down a pasuk. The pasuk, where do we know that today's fast is where it is? It's a pasuk in Yechezkel. Yeah? It says as follows. Tzom Asiri, Ze Asara B'Tevet, Shebo Samach Melech Bavel al Yerushalayim. That's when he encircled Yerushalayim. Shnema, V'yihi Devar Hashem Elai, B'shana Cheese, B'chodesh Asiri, B'asor L'chodesh Leimor Ben Adam is addressing to Yechezkel Navi. Kasav Hashem Hayom, Hashem Hayom Hazeh, Etzem Hayom Hazeh, Etzem Hayom Hazeh. It's called Etzem Hayom, this very day. The Bnei Yisachar is Medayah. He says like this. The Rishonim learn that Etzem Hayom means that Asara B'Tevet has to be on Asara B'Tevet, and that theoretically, now it's never going to fall out this way because of the construction of our calendar, but theoretically, had it been that the Asara B'Tevet could fall out on our Shabbos, it would be Dorcha Shabbos. Because it says Be'etzem Hayom Hazeh. That's so important to give it on this day, Asara B'Tevet. So he says like this. The Rishonim then understand that why is Asara B'Tevet so chashuv? Etzem Hayom Hazeh, this very day. The pshat is, it's called the Haskalah de Pranos. Haskalah de Pranos means it was the beginning of the Pranos. Obviously, Tisha B'Av is the destruction of the Mikdash, The beginning starts on Asara B'Tevet. Memela, that's why we know the halacha is that if there's, when we have to mark Tisha B'Av, the base of Mikdash, it burned for 2 days. And there's a shaila anymore, maybe we should keep the 10th. We can't keep 2 days, they don't want us to, it's too much. And we keep the first day. Why? They learn out from Asara B'Tevet that Haschal the Puranos, the beginning of the Puranos is more chashuv. So Asara B'Tevet is not just the marking of the beginning of the destruction of the temple, but it's understanding this is the beginning is the mark of which we have to really remember and do tshuva for. That being said, perhaps, I'd like to suggest to you an idea. That's what all these things are haskalas. The translation of the Torah into Yavanis is the beginning of 2,000 years of Torah that we have with the Ummos HaOlam. Them claiming that they're the Bechorah. Their claim that the Torah is theirs. They claim that that there's something new going on in this world. There's nothing new. The Torah is ours, the Torah was given to us, and in a Chanami, we want them to learn the Torah. They should learn the Torah without the changes, and they should understand the Torah, and either they can become Geri Tzedek, or they can become keep the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, and that's our way to get Tikkun Olam. We believe in Tikkun Olam. We want them to learn it. But now that they've co-opted the Torah and changed the Torah, the Gemara says, it's called a ziyuf. It's a ziyuf. It's a forgery. It's counterfeit to change the meaning of the words, etc. So now we've got a history of confusion among the Ummos HaOlam about what the Torah says and what it means. Perhaps the beginning starts with the translation when they co-opted that which is special to us. Next, you have Ezra. Now, Ezra Sofer is not so simple either, because they ask a kasha here. Why is it that we mark, according to this pshat, that the 9th, which by the way, you look in the Sfarim, sometimes we say, the Sfarim say we really don't know why they decreed the 9th to be a day of fasting, even though we don't fast, but there's an Indian to fast. So they say it's because of the death of Ezra Sofer. That's not such a simple idea. Why? Because we do not find other people's p'tira that we fast for. We do by Gedaliah ben Achikam, which is Tzom Gedaliah, and that's special because v'shabon nera Gedaliah ben Achikam, v'man sheshikula misashin shal tzadikim tzreifes beis Elokeinu, and it says he put out the Gachelis, the end of the Jewish Yishuv was Gedaliah ben Achikam. So that was special. But really, Ezra Sofer, just to say because he was niftar on this day, doesn't really, on the 9th, that doesn't really justify l'chora that we should have a fast day for it. So they say because the pshat is Nevuah stopped. Nevuah stops with Ezra Sofer. When Nevuah was niftar, that was the end of Nevuah. Also Nehemiah was also niftar, that was the end of Nevuah in Klal Yisrael. Which means that we're going into a new Tekufa. Now we know that the Nevuah was replaced by Torah Shabbat, so to speak. The growth of Torah Shabbat Peh comes in Bayis Sheni. Remember, Ezra is the one who brings us back from Golas Bayis Rishon to Bayis Sheni, and now we're coming back, and that's when the beginning of Torah Shabbat Peh and the ultimate growth of Torah Shabbat Peh. So we have Torah Shabbat Peh, but Torah Shabbat Peh is our understanding. Nevuah is having direct communication with Rabbanu Shalom. That stops with Ezra Sofer. And it could be, in some level, that's the beginning of our need to really experience a Hesta Panim, which leads to a Golas. So these days, the Asara B'Tevet is a beginning of Tsar for the Jewish people. Be it the Tsar of the Ummos HaOlam with our Torah Kedosha, be it the Tsar of the destruction of the base of Mikdash, be it the Tsar of our lacking an open relationship with the Rebbeinu Shalom and having to deal with Golas, which is Behester. So now, let's take this down to ourselves for a moment. There's a lot to say, but I'm speaking to the B'nai Yeshiva here. Today, everything's translated, isn't it? Everything's translated. It's all translated. So you know what we got a problem. People can be mezayef. People can counterfeit our world. And it's probably they could, right? But I want to ask anybody here in this room, I want to ask anybody, and be honest. You get yourself a Schottenstein, which is a gewaldige thing. It was a monumental work. It opened up the Talmud to thousands and thousands of people. It has a hechsher from the greatest Rabbanim. That's not the issue. Read it. Read it on your own. Don't go to shir. Just read it on your own. How much will you understand? You'll understand something. I once met somebody before they had Schottenstein. He had read Sensino. First of all, the ability to read it in the first place was a major accomplishment on my part. Now, what he understood, he read through half a Shas. He was a not religious young man. I mean, he read half a Shas. He didn't know a word. You can be an Amaharetz and Kol Torah Kula. You can learn. You can look at Shas. You can learn the translations. It does have some meaning, but everyone in this room knows that the Masorah of Torah Sheba'al Peh, which Moshe Rabbeinu said, Hashem said, I'm not going to put that, I'm not going to translate it. The Masorah of Torah Sheba'al Peh remains a Masorah. It remains a Masorah. Everyone in this room has to spend hours, literally hours, understanding Gemara, Rashi, Tosfos, a Diak, a Svara, a Rishon, an Acharon, comparing, discussing, fighting. And that only comes by sitting in front of your Rebbe. That's a Masorah from Hamayimid Har Sinai. There's been yeshivas in Klal Yisrael since the time of Adam HaRishon. There's never Pasek Meshiva. Yeshiva's always been there. Shem V'Eva and continuing on. Even in Mitzrayim, with Yehuda, there's been yeshiva. And yeshiva is a Masorah. And the Masorah is handed on from Rebbe to Talmud. And you people in yeshiva are experiencing that. So it's true. You can read. You can read Svarim today. But if you're not taught how to learn, if you're not given the tools about how to analyze, if you're not shown the way how to approach a sugya, it's still hidden. You can know the facts. You can read the facts. We all know the facts don't mean anything. The facts are not the point. The whole point is how to deal with the facts. How do you analyze the facts? How do you compare the facts? There was a man, I heard from Rav Volbe. Rav Volbe said, there's a man who translated many books of the Kabbalah. You can find these translations. They're in English. He said in the mirror, Nishkavust ain't vort from Kabbalah. He didn't know one word of Kabbalah. He translated all this for him. But he didn't know Kabbalah. Because he was not a Makubal. And he didn't learn properly. And unfortunately, I think he was a Kofar. He didn't know one word. Well, we're talking about Nigla. Perhaps you can know halacha. You can know what it says. But to analyze it, to be able to deal with it properly, to understand the depths of learning is only by sitting in front of a Rav to Talmud, and passing it over. That's Aleph. So even though things are translated, this is like the Torah that's given on those rocks. It was given over by Moshe Rabbeinu. We're learning Torah's Moshe. You know, I want to tell you something interesting about the Sefer Torah that was written on those stones. That Sefer Torah was not Stam. The one was written at least in Hebrew. It had the Tagim. We have a Sefer called Sefer Tagim. Sefer Tagim are the little things on the top of the letters. There's different Tagim on the letters. The Masorah for the Tagim, says the Ramban, came from the Sefer Tagim, which was copied off the Sefer Torah they put on the rocks. Now obviously, in foreign language, there's no Tagim. But in Hebrew, there's Tagim. And that's where we get it. The Tagim are the crowns of the letters. It says that, Rabbi Akiva, Moshe Rabbeinu went to Shemayim. He says, Mi ma'akiv al yadaka. The Torah was already written, and Shem's busy making the Tagim. He says, there's going to come a man, Akiva ben Yosef Shmo, and he's going to darshan tilim of halachas from the Tagim. Yeah, thousands of halachas from the Tagim. Rav Moshe Shapiro Zatzal once explained that the tilim, those are the amchis, that's the pneumius of the Torah that lies in every letter of the Torah. And that was on the Torah that was written on those rocks. That Torah was Kodesh Kedoshim. And that's the Torah that we're receiving here in this room and every yeshiva in the world. And every yeshul in the world where they have a shir and a Rebbe gives over the daf yom, if he's giving over property, he's giving over to his talmidim. But they can read all they want. And if they want to learn, they should come and learn. We believe in Tikkun Olam. We believe in Tikkun Olam. But this is Tikkun Olam. It doesn't mean necessarily we have to go out and be proactive in social causes, which is very nice, but that's not the job of a yeshiva man. So we have to realize that Asara B'Tevet It was a time when our Torah was co-opted, when people can misrepresent what the Torah means. It was a time when we lost that open relationship with the Rabbanu Shalom, and it was a time with the beginning of the destruction of the temple. And every year, Chaver, I just want to end with one point. It's hard for us to realize this. The reason we fast is not because, to save the money on the lunch. That's not the point. But have an excuse that I have a tummy ache. We're fasting because that's the derech HaTshuva. We're supposed to awaken ourselves a little bit, to realize that we're in a Golus, and the Golus hasn't ended, and it's changed its form. The basic Mikdash is not rebuilt. There's still all sorts of issues going on in Klal Yisrael in the world, and we're still waiting ultimately for its rebuilding. And until that happens, we're not there yet. But it's incumbent on us to make it happen. Not by going down and actively building it, but by building ourselves to be the Yidden who are roy to be Mekabel Pnei Shir B'Tzikeinu B'Mehera B'Yameinu. Amen.